the history of transportation. In this video, we'll be discussing the history of transportation and what led up to how we get around today. Aside from walking and running, the very first method of getting from one place to another the fastest was through water via canoes. The canoe was invented at different times by many different cultures around the world, but what is believed to be the oldest is the Pes canoe, which was simply a dugout log with some paddles. These canoes were constructed in the Netherlands around 10,000 years ago. About 2,000 years later, the first ever type of skis were invented in Russia and are a lot faster than canoes. There are wall paintings dated back to about 1,000 years prior that may suggest an older variant of skis from China, but this is still being debated. Finally, about 5,000 years ago, a method of getting around was invented in Mesopotamia and is way more efficient and way faster than the two I've put across so far, and this method is chariots. These chariot wagon type things were originally pulled by an onaga, which are now an extinct horse-zebra creature native to Mesopotamia. Now they did this because horses at the time were not evolved enough yet to have the strength to pull chariots. During all of this, rafts and eventually steerable boats like coracles were created for aquatic use. But about 3,000 years ago, the galley was invented by the Phoenicians and was originally used as a trading ship. They could fit up to 1,000 people depending on what kind they were. Now, not much happened for a long time. Things like the wheelbarrow were invented, I guess, but not many groundbreaking things were created. Until the horse and carriage was invented in Europe as early as the 1500s. The really early ones from this time period were not very comfortable, being described as having 4 wheels with a leather or fabric arched covering over a bent wood hooped frame. In fact, Queen Elizabeth I had such a horrible experience riding one of these to the opening of Parliament in 1571 that she never rode one ever again until it was redesigned a bit later. In 1783, the first ever air-based travel was shown off in Paris by 2 French people I can't pronounce the name of. This miracle flying machine is now known as the hot air balloon and was invented by 2 more French people that I cannot pronounce the name of. A few years later, the first commercially successful steamboat was invented by Robert Fulton. This allowed boats to be used without the need for oars, labor, or sails. Then, in 1802, Richard Trevithick, I think that's how you pronounce it, created the first steam locomotive, which would mark the beginning of the industrial age. First thing up was the dandy horse, invented in 1818. This was a 2-wheeled wooden structure designed for a singular person to get around faster. To move, you would propel it forward using your feet, like a child's push bike. Next, the airship, created in 1852 by Henry Giffard, which would be made into things like the blimp or a zeppelin, used for warfare among other things. Next, the first ever steam-powered bicycle, known as the Roper Steam Velocipede, invented by Sylvester H. Roper in 1867, which would eventually become the modern-day motorcycle. Next, the penny farthing was the first ever bicycle to use pedals and was a big step towards what we now have today. Next, the first ever petroleum-powered car, invented also in 1870 by Siegfried Marcus, is what led to the invention of the Model T and among the diesel engine, invented in 1892, would eventually help create the modern-day cars we have today. Finally, we have made it to the 20th century, when inventions started to slow, and the first successful aeroplane, created by the Wright brothers in 1903, would eventually contribute to the modern-day air travel we have today. Along with this, decades later, in 1939, the first practical helicopter was invented by Igor Sikorsky, was the first helicopter to remotely resemble what we now have today. Now, the first ever rocket was invented in the 1940s by Walter von Braun, and would lead to the spaceships invented by the Russian scientist Konstantin, and then his last name, but I don't know how to pronounce that, and Robert Goddard.